We're almost to the ledge.
Snug.
Just one more and phew, we can take a rest. Hello there. Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett. In addition to providing informative and entertaining photography-related content, I also go on adventures with the crew of the Starship Fibonacci. Right now, Golden Hour and I are climbing up a mountain peak to meet with a local guru to get some advice on where we should go next on our journey.
Snug, 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 snug.
Yeah, I'm aware it's a difficult climb. On this episode of the podcast, I talk with photographer, educator, writer, and a host of the Candid Frame podcast, Ibarionix Perello. We discuss how conversations in the photography community are evolving and the weight he feels as someone who has been leading a lot of those conversations over the last 25 years. All of that after the break.
Snug, 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 snug. Snug, 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 snug.
Listen, you don't get to complain since you're riding in a backpack. Photographers, filmmakers, and creators, it's time to gear up with Adorama. Whether you're shooting your first frame or your next masterpiece, Adorama has everything you need to bring your vision to life. Cameras, lenses, lighting, and studio gear. From the latest cutting-edge equipment to trusted essentials, Adorama is your one-stop shop for the tools creators rely on. Plus, with expert advice, fast shipping, and incredible selection, you'll spend less time searching and more time creating. Get our special discounts at nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/Adorama. That's nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/Adorama. Adorama, more than a camera store, it's where creativity lives. Hey photographers, are you ready for a website glow up? Get supercharged with StyleCloud. StyleCloud offers beautifully designed, high-performing website templates built just for creatives like you. Whether you're showcasing weddings, portraits, or passion projects, you'll look as good online as your work does in print. Were you left high and dry and wondering what you were going to do with your Flow Themes website when the company shut down? No problem. StyleCloud makes migrating your Flow Themes site easy. Your content moves over, no stress, no mess. Plus, import your images directly from your PicTime galleries. No downloading, no re-uploading, just seamless integration and stunning design. Visit nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/StyleCloud or visit the link in the episode notes. Save 15% when you use code NerdyPhoto15 at checkout. That's nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/StyleCloud and use code NerdyPhoto15. StyleCloud isn't just a template, it's a launchpad for your brand. Get started today. Hello and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett, and I'm here today with Ibarionix Perello, a photographer, author, teacher, and podcast host of The Candid Frame, which I think currently has over 600 episodes right now. Ibarionix, thank you very much for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, like an honor for me. And we're going to start out with the dice breaker. It's a 7. What is the best photography or business related advice you've ever received?
Wow. Whew. That is a solid question. What is the best advice that I had? To be just prepared. One of the photographer friends who hired me at the Huntington Library, he was John. His name is John. And it was impressive to always see him like the day before a shoot, be very exacting about getting all the gear prepared. Because we have to photograph the galleries sometimes at the Huntington. There's an exhibit. And so the curators want us to photograph the space so they can have a historical document of that. And even though it's fairly straightforward, he was always very exacting in terms of preparing leading up to the shoot for the next day. And that's something that I have sort of followed, because inevitably there's some little piece of equipment that you think is in the case and it's not in the case. And so I have I came to that sort of practice late, but I'm glad that I do it now, because I'm now very, very dutiful of making sure that everything that I need is in the case, is in the kit, so that at the last minute I don't forget something.
It's one of those things that I do. I have like a checklist that I kind of go through before I do a lot of weddings. It's like a huge portion of my business, but it's like the day before where I'm going through and I'm checking the batteries. How charged up are the batteries? Are all of my like memory cards formatted properly? Like, I'm not going to go out there like show up and like look at them like, oh, I've got 6 shots left on this card. Those sorts of things, like going through the proper preparation prevents poor performance.
And I also do like a walkthrough at the end. All the spaces that I was shooting in, I will walk through just to make sure that something that I put down I didn't forget.
Yeah.
A cable, a lens cap, whatever.
Well, that's one I could do better at. And I don't know if it's just my anxiety that makes me think I forgot something, because I'll get in the car and I'm like on my way home and I go, I did it last night. I had an event that I was photographing last night, and I seriously took my camera bag, put it in the back of my car, was driving out of Manhattan, and I was in the tunnel and I was like, did I even put my bag in the car? It was because I couldn't get to the back of my car for where it was parked. So I had to pull it out, and it just kept like going over in my head and thinking, did I actually do that? Is that? And I'm like, nope. I heard the bag shift as I was driving, so I knew that I know it's back there. You have a very long record as both a photographer and an interviewer on your show, but I'm curious if there was a different path that you could have taken creatively, what would that be?
Oh, I think fiction writer, probably.
Who's your favorite? Like, give me top 3 authors that you like.
Authors. Off the top of my head, James Baldwin. F. Scott Fitzgerald. Just because I've read The Great Gatsby, I don't know how many times. It's a book that I always revisit. I don't know what it is about that book, but probably, every 5 or 7 years I pick it up. And there are very few books that I reread over and over again, but for some reason I really gravitate to that book. And then lastly definitely would be Junot Diaz, just because of a shared Dominican heritage. And he was one of the first authors whose work I looked at and I saw my life reflected in it.
Interesting.
So yeah, those 3 are the first 3 that come to mind.
So would you be writing like period fiction? Would you be like, what kind of fiction would you write?
I've always gravitated to speculative fiction. I've always enjoyed that. Like Murakami.
Yeah.
I really like Murakami's work just because it's our world, but just a little twist to it. So I've always favored that work just for the kind of reading where I just take pleasure in. I loved Harlan Ellison. I was blessed enough to get to know him, and I really just had so much fun with his writing. But I've always enjoyed that, both in film and in television and in books. Speculative fiction, not really hard science fiction. I'm not that guy. I'm not going to be.
That's me.
And I've finally got around to reading Dune several years ago. The first 4 novels.
Those are the only ones you should read, by the way.
Yeah, don't read I hear it gets weirder and weirder.
Don't read anymore.
But hard science fiction like Asimov and stuff like that, I just didn't get into it when I was a kid. And I think that's the perfect age, like preteen, to get into the really hard science fiction. And I've read it, but it's not something that really derive a lot of joy from reading. But yeah,
I was a physics kid. I was a physics major before I got anything, and so that like the science fiction stuff, like you mentioned, Dune was like, I've read all the novels, but like I wish I had just stopped at the 4th one. I just wish that I would have stopped at the 4th one, and I don't know. I find so much in those books that's very interesting that I think could be taught, especially today. It teaches you about propaganda, economics, ecology, all these things. I think that would be important for people to know about. But I get what you're saying. Like there's seems to be almost like a window for like if you're going to be really into that. Like it's generally like your teenagers is going to determine whether or not if something you're into really gets stuck in.
Yeah, I remember just being a real fan of Jack Finney. who
Mm.
wrote, I forget the name, the time travel novel he wrote. Is it Time After Time or something like that? He wrote several time travel, and I always gravitated to books that explored time travel.
If you
But
like time travel and you want to see a movie that's good, I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Primer.
yes, I've seen it.
Oh my
Great,
god, that movie is like
fantastic.
that is in my top 10 movies of all time. Like I was
Really?
like because
Okay.
it's just like it that sits with you for a really long. Like I still turn to my wife and go like, "You remember in Primer?" And she's like, "Oh, it's like I'm like, how long would I have to be waiting?" Yeah, just nuts. Anyway, so kind of on the same note, I'm wondering if you if there's been a moment because it's something that I've gone through. I've been a photographer for more than 20 years, and I kind of like find myself kind of every once in a while reevaluating and going, is this still what I want to do? Has there ever been a moment when you've wanted to like pull back from
Oh,
photography or
yeah. There was one moment. I forget exactly. I think it was in my 20s or early 30s. I still was working at Nikon, so yeah, probably mid 20s, and I just felt stuck. I felt like I wasn't making any progress as a photographer. I was making a lot of pictures, but I felt like it just was nothing was good. And I said, I just give up. And I remember putting all my equipment in the closet, putting it in the bag and putting it back in the closet. And I think it probably sat there for 6 or 9 months, something like that. And then one day I was like, what the hell am I doing? And I pulled it back out and it started making photographs again. But I think that was like the one time I ever really considered giving it up. But after a while, it just called to me.
well,
And so I dusted it off and went back out there and started making pictures.
I'm curious what made you feel like that you should put it down, like because a lot of people I think deal with imposter syndrome, like
Mm-hmm.
right now, and that term gets thrown around a lot. Um, but I mean, I still feel like there's times when I like, oh man, am I really like I don't know if it's my own anxiety or what it is, but I think a lot of people deal with that. There's just this feeling like, am I producing work that is like on the level with what people think that I should be producing, like, or that I deserve the, I don't know, accolade, not necessarily accolades, but like just the positive thoughts that people send my way for my work.
Yeah, I think I was largely comparing myself to other people whose work I really admired, and then just found my images just falling short of that,
Yeah.
and not really understanding why that was. And then just going out there and making lots of pictures, and then continually feeling frustrated that I felt that the images were subpar. And it's just the reality was I wasn't there yet.
Hmm.
I was making good pictures, but I just wasn't making pictures that were on par with that, which is really an unfair comparison because some of the people I was comparing myself to had already been shooting for decades,
Yeah.
professionally. And so the fact that I wasn't able to use light or create compositions that were comparable to some of the people that I was looking at, I was just creating a situation where I was just doomed to fail rather than just saying, everyone starts somewhere and I just need to shoot and practice and know that the majority of pictures that I make are not going to work, but that they're all towards, all those failures are towards the goal of being able to learn from the failures so that you can improve and be consistent. And I figured that out at some point. And, now I completely accept the fact that the great majority of photographs that I make fall short. And that's just part of the process.
Yeah. I think that it gets said a lot. I mean, I just got done having a conversation with somebody on Reddit about this I was saying like, don't compare yourself to other people. I mean, it's fine to look at somebody's work and go like, oh man, that's a great shot. And like, it's beautiful. And I would like to figure out how they took that or whatever, but don't sit there and compare yourself to where they are either artistically or in their career, whatever. And somebody came back and was like, oh, well, I don't see why it's a problem. Like, why should I not be wishing I could, if I see somebody who does landscape photography, why should I be wishing that I could just travel all the time and take pictures of cool landscapes? And I was like, you really haven't talked to a professional landscape photographer then, because That is not what they're doing.
Yeah.
And many of them live near or at least within driving distance of the places that they photograph most often. And they're probably only traveling, the vast majority of them are only traveling probably once or twice a year and
Yeah.
taking a ton of photos on that trip. And that's like like spending the rest of their year just like editing those photos and picking out the 5 or 6 from that are going to be like portfolio pieces. And they're like, what, really? I'm like, yeah. This is, understanding that everybody has I say like the different journey. Like some people achieve commercial success very quickly just for whatever reason, and to like sit there and like compare yourself like, oh, why am I not selling as much as they do or booking as
Oh,
much as it is?
yeah.
Just so bad for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's just the very nature, because we're always learning from other people's work. It's in the photography. I think the great majority of people are quote unquote self-taught. They don't, which means that they're not taking formal classes or things like that. So you're learning from looking at other people's work. Now, most people are educated about photography on YouTube, which is a whole different conversation. But nevertheless, you're looking at what other people are doing and emulating that and trying to learn how those people made the photographs, so you can learn the technical aspect, and then hopefully at some point be able to express something personal, having learned that technique. But the trap is, comparing yourself to someone who has achieved more than you, and then feeling like somehow they're innately talented and they possess something that you don't have, which is really not the case. It's just like, no, they just put in the time, they practiced, and they strive for consistency.
Yeah. They've built the career. It's like, it's sort of I think a great analogy in that it make it very easy to kind of tell people like to stop doing that. It's like, I don't know. I had posted some like, what's in my bag? Like, I'm going to a wedding. Like, I got 2 camera bodies. I got all these lenses and stuff. A lot of it is for like redundancy in case something breaks, because, I can't like go out and like get a new lens while I'm like at this event. And this was, I don't know, it was probably during the pandemic. And somebody replied like, oh man, I wish I had like your kit. And it's like, that's 20 years. It's 20 years. And some of those lenses I'd had for like over a decade, and like, these things like that, that's 20 years of like building up to that. So don't start like you just started out, you've been doing this for a year. Don't think that you're going to like, don't put yourself in debt to like,
Don't. No, it's not worth it.
It's definitely not worth it.
Yeah. And when I see young photographers who have like a 10-year-old digital camera, or even a 30-year-old film camera, and producing amazing results, is like, man, it's just not about the kit.
Yeah.
As much as I like new toys. Okay, I'm no different than anybody else, but I also have a healthy perspective in terms of I don't need that to necessarily do what I need to do. And I just see so many examples of people who are working with stuff that is not the latest and the greatest, but they're producing exceptional work, and it's just like, it's making the choice to do what you can with what you have.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. And putting in the time to go out and do it, and not using it some excuse to not make the work.
I think that is the thing that is holding a lot of people back, is the making that excuse. Like, well, I don't have the gear to do. What can you do with the gear that you have? Like, get out there, take pictures, figure out what you can do, push it like that. Like I mean, there are times when I look back at, pictures that I made earlier on, and I think, you know what? I was way more innovative when I had less gear.
Yes.
Because I had to be.
Yeah, there's a photographer out of San Francisco, Richard Cochi Hernandez. He's a photojournalist, primarily documentary photography. He teaches at the Graduate School of Journalism at Berkeley. At least he did. And he had an incredible body of work on Instagram that was made just with his phone. I mean, he had Leica, he had all that other stuff, but he just made this amazing body of work that was just about the camera and using a variety of different filters to manipulate the image. And I look at that work, and it's just astounding, astounding. And he was using a phone. And I first discovered him about over 10 years ago. So back in the day, he was using, whatever generation of iPhone
Yeah.
at the time. But still, it didn't matter. And I look at what he did with just that, with just that phone, and it's like, there's no excuse.
Yeah, you can create and then I'm sure you get this question all the time. People like, I'm thinking about buying a camera for my kid or for, so and so for their birthday or for the holidays or something. And my question is always like, well, what kind of stuff do they like taking pictures of? And there's like, no, like, oh, they just kind of like taking pictures of everything. And I'm like, just make sure they've got a good phone camera. It's like right now, like at first, like they can do so much with that, like especially if it's a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, before you go out and spend thousands of dollars on a bunch of stuff, like figure out what they like to take pictures of, what kind of setup would be best for because if they decide they want to take pictures of birds, it's going to be totally different than pictures of they like taking pictures of landscapes or street photography or whatever they enjoy doing is going to be a completely different setup. So just make sure they got a good phone camera. They can figure out what they want to do and then go from there.
Yeah. And if they get to the point where they starting to get serious, go out and get a KEH and buy a used camera that's 7 years old. And then when they really get into it, then they can make the investment. But you could get a nice kit with a body and a lens for like less than $500.
Yeah. They can find. Yeah. I again, not a sponsor. KEH, great for I would if they want to sponsor me, fine, go ahead. But yeah, definitely that's my go-to for used gear. Yeah. I have bought so much used film stuff from them.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That I got back into shooting film a few years ago, and now it's becoming a habit.
Now I've gotten to the point when I want to buy something new is like, okay, what are we going to sell? Right? Seriously.
Yeah. What do I not need anymore?
Yeah, there's a lens that I want, and I have the money to just buy it outright, but I'm like, no, let me sell some stuff so that I don't have to go into the wallet to pay for it.
Yeah.
Because there's some stuff that's sitting around here that I'm not using, and I said, just let it go and use that money to buy the lens. So that's my kind of attitude now. Before I add anything to the kit, is like, what can I get rid of?
Oh, I mean, that is such a photographer thing. We don't let go of our boxes. I don't do I still have boxes from cameras. I threw out a bunch a few years ago, but I still have the camera body boxes for
oh yeah,
and I'm like, do I still have that camera? I can't even remember if I sold that off, if I traded that in for something, and but I still have the box in my basement. It's come on.
Yeah, about a year and a half to 2 years ago, I got rid of all the boxes because they were just taking up so much space. Right. And I was just holding on to them because at some point I may sell it and I might get more for it. I was just
oh, if I have the original packaging.
Yeah. And I was just just let me just get rid of it. It's not going to make that much difference. And it was just it was just sucking air from the room, having all those things there. So
I was in a 1-bedroom New York City apartment.
Ooh.
And when my wife and I moved to our house in New Jersey, I was emptying out my closet because there were only 2 closets. We each had 1 closet, and the whole above the rack area of my closet was full of boxes of stuff. And she was like, "What is even in those?" And I'm like, I don't even know if there's anything. She's like, "Why have you taken up so much space?"
Yeah,
empty boxes. So that was a big spring cleaning of empty gear boxes.
Yeah, that's pretty much automatic now for me. I get the kit, take everything out of it, and then it's out in the trash.
Yeah, I'm getting much better at it. I actually was using a camera body box to hold up my subwoofer for a little while, and I was like, no, I got to get something to actually. I gotta put something under that. I can't actually leave that there. That's That box has got to go.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I've done a lot of interviews on this show, but you have done, you're like, again, the 600s, whatever. Has any interview that you've done fundamentally shifted your view of photography or the photography community?
I can really speak to a singular interview that did that. But I think one of the things that has sort of developed over time and kind of serves as a kind of a mantra for me is that there's no singular path for making a life revolving around photography. I think early on, I felt that there was like a real rigid outline in terms of what you needed to do in order to make a career. Right? Yeah. You had to do X, Y, and Z in order to get there. And I quickly learned from talking to all these people that, oh, that's just a myth. You know, I talked to so many people who start in very different ways and make a career, make a life from photography that is not so easily defined. There are people who, make a career but never leave their 9-to-5 job, right? And then people who make substantive work and they're still working, doing whatever, they're a cab driver or dentist or whatever it is they're doing, and then they basically fund their interest in photography by the regular gig rather than relying on photography to be their source, their primary source of income, right? And there are people who come to photography late in life, right?
Yeah.
And are, again, able to create substantive bodies of work, even though they came to it in their 50s or their 60s or sometimes even later. So it was that was kind of a clarity for me. It was just like, oh, wow, you can have photography be a big part of your personal and creative life, but there's no approved structure that you have to adhere to in order to make that happen. So I think that's what I've taken away from my conversations with people. And it's one of the things when I talk about the podcast, it's one of the things that I like to emphasize, especially the people who are early on in their photographic journey, where they always think in terms of black and white, what I should do or what I shouldn't do and can or can't and all that stuff. It's like, it's not dentistry, it's not brain surgery, it's photography, and you can approach it in a myriad of different ways.
I mean, I think that it's those sorts of things like if you hear have to, immediately start applying the grains of salt immediately to that advice, whatever those sorts of extreme, like you must, or you have to, or you you can approach it this way. You can do it in any number of ways. Like you said, oh gosh, I can't even remember who that photographer was. You mentioned cab driver, the guy there's a New York cabbie who took pictures of, out the window and end of his, his fare.
Rodriguez is, I think, is his surname.
Yeah. But those photos are incredible. It just made me think of that. There's, okay. So here's a question for you. Do you think that is in our sort of, I don't know, looking at historically for photography, that now we are sort of driven by social media in a lot of ways. There's a lot of, I think for people who are starting out, there's a feeling or need that I have to succeed on social media to be noticed in any way. And if I'm not getting that recognition, then I'm doing it wrong somehow. I'm not, and I think that leads to people trying to be copycats, whatever. But I'm curious, historically, that sort of thing, back in film, the days of film, we weren't so connected to what each other was doing.
Mm-hmm. I think that social media, what it created was a quicker way for you to get noticed with respect to your photography. But at the same time, it didn't allow you to really gestate in terms of your creativity and get to the point where you really developed as a photographer. You developed your way of seeing and curating your own work, and then getting to the point that you were, quote unquote, ready to showcase and share your work and to sell it. Now you could take a picture and immediately post it to Instagram or to Facebook without really any effort for curation at all, you know. And then based on people's responses in terms of liking, that was it. So I think that in terms of, you know, that's the way people sort of evaluated, quote unquote, success, is by the number of people that got to follow them and the number of likes they could get to their images. But that doesn't necessarily translate into you being an effective visual communicator in terms of the work. You might be able to develop a skill where you can get likes on Instagram, you know, and that's why you see some photographers create the same sort of style and aesthetic, and all their images are pretty much exactly the same because they've understood the algorithm, and to some degree, that has allowed some photographers to create a niche for themselves, and maybe it translates into a more an opportunity, either professionally to get work or something like that. But again, it robs the photographer of a period where they're developing. And if they get tied to, I got to get likes, I got to get attention, you're creating work for that purpose, for that end result, rather than creating work solely for yourself, right? And being willing to make mistakes and to work on long-term projects that don't give you the immediate feedback and affirmation that social media does.
I think that the way you're talking about, like not allowing yourself to like gestate and sort of like come out of the chrysalis and like as a fully formed your butterfly or whatever, like, you know, that sort of thing is because you're rushing yourself. You're like rushing for like, I have to be successful or else it's not worth it. And I think that another thing, I mean, based on that and something that I experienced a little bit was not allowing myself to evolve. Like I felt like I have it and I'm getting a little bit of recognition like for my business. So I got to stick to this. I can't, you know, divert into another area because I got to stay here because this is where I'm experiencing some success. Like even when I didn't come up in like the days of social media, but like there's sort of a sense of like, okay, now I'm having, people are coming to me for this type of work. And there was this like a feeling of like, okay, I've got to stick to this because if I change it all, like then people aren't gonna, like if I want to grow, I can't, you know, like divert from that.
Yeah, and in terms of the business, particularly with wedding photography, it kind of sort of makes sense if you have a particular style that people are gravitating to. You know, some photographers that shoot just black and white. They're photographers who, I mean, everybody does documentary style now, but I remember, back during the Pleistocene where we were doing more traditional work, and all of a sudden photographers started doing more photojournalistic work. They really stood out, and then they were the odd man out in terms of that particular style, but people who really responded to it, and so they were able to create a niche that really made them very unique, very distinctive. And so people started gravitating to the work, but eventually the entire industry sort of skewed towards that.
Gravitated that way.
But I think that, you know, regardless of what kind of photography you sort of favor, is like if you do find that there's an approach or an aesthetic that you like to follow for your own self, for your own gratification, that can be marketable, you know, especially if you're trying to earn a living from it. And I think that's all well and good. You know, sometimes you do have to define yourself in that. You can't just be this, you know, this generalist. People want to kind of know. They want you in a box.
Yeah.
Which, you may not particularly like, but when you're trying to sell your services, it makes sense for people to kind of understand who you are and how you do it and what you're delivering to them. And then it kind of makes sense to, reproduce that work and share it in order to get more work along those lines.
I think that's you've got to solve a problem, whatever type of
Yes.
photography you're trying. If you're doing it in some commercial way, you're selling it to somebody. If you're selling prints, people want art on their wall. You're solving a problem by providing like that. You have to figure out what problem you're solving for people.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it was like in the wedding photography stuff, it wasn't necessarily like it was, I didn't think that I could. And when I think I had my biggest breakthrough was realizing like, oh, this is the thing that I like doing most about this. And people just don't know how to formulate that into words, like my clients. And until I started asking them questions afterwards and being like, what did you like about these photos? Why did you come to me? Like, and then when people like would come to me, starting to ask them, what about my photos brought you here? Like made you get in touch with me. And then finding out like, oh, I can lean more in that direction. I can like I thought I was in my groove, but I really didn't find it until I allowed myself to kind of take a bit of a turn and go deeper into it, because I was afraid, well, if I do that, then I'm going to lose what work I have. And instead, I actually went in a direction that strengthened my business a lot more by like allowing myself to change. And another thing I think that's sort of like parallel to that is like, you don't always have to, like, if you want to do things for yourself creatively that are separate from your business, that's totally fine. You don't have to monetize it. Like you can have something that's creative that is not part of your business.
And you don't want to create a situation where, you create an approach to making pictures that you completely dislike.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's marketable and all that other stuff. And when you have to go out there and shoot it, you go, oh, God damn it, I got to go out there and do this again. I much prefer to shoot things the way I like to shoot them. And I've accepted jobs where I chose to shoot in a different way just because I felt like that's what they were expecting me to do. And I always hated those jobs. Always. And it was my own fault, right? Because rather than saying, this is the way I do it, and, this is what I'm going to do, because this is how I feel comfortable, expressing myself with the camera. But insecurity,
I think it's
more than anything else. So I would change it, and then they were more than likely happy with the results, but I sure wasn't happy with the experience.
Yeah, I think that's kind of that insecurity, imposter syndrome. Like, oh, this is what they want. This is what they want. They don't want my flavor or whatever I normally bring to this. I think it's having, like you said, having that confidence in yourself and like, this is what I do. And I think that it's hard for people, especially starting out, who are just like trying to get enough jobs. Like, oh, I gotta have enough. They say yes to jobs that don't fit their style or whatever. Yeah. And coming to the earlier you can come to grips with that, like that you're not the right person for everybody, the better off you're going to be, because I said yes to jobs for sure that I was not the right photographer for, and it left a bad taste in their mouth, and I didn't feel good about it because I just wasn't the person. And now I'm way more confident saying like, I could take this job, I could get the paycheck, but it's not right. It's like, it's going to be a pain for me. They're not going to like it. It's going to reflect poorly on me. Like, I'm just not the person for this. Here's somebody I know that's who you're looking for.
Yeah. And I've gotten the attitude now that I'll price it at a level. If it's a job like that, I'll price it at a place where I expect them to say no. But if they do say yes, it'll be worth it to me.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, I don't know. I think that for me, I think when I do that is like when it's a job where they're like, no, we don't have like that much in the budget. And you're like, I'm not the right person for this. It makes it a little easier for me to say no. But if they can bump up the budget, then yeah, definitely make it worth my while to shoot out of my comfort zone. Okay, now you've been doling out some advice here. Do you ever feel like, with your position in the photography industry and I mean, you've got one of the longest running, if not the longest consecutively running podcast in like the photography world. I think at this point, maybe there's like one or two other ones that might still be
Yeah, I
running.
think the only other one that is continually producing is
Is it This Week in
Martin
Photography?
Bailey. Martin Bailey's photography podcast. He's out of Japan. He started the year before I did, or it's like 6 months.
Yeah,
And the other one was Tips from the Top Floor, but I don't know if Chris Marquardt still regularly produces his show. And I'm not sure about This Week in Photography. They've gone in and out of production.
they've had like changes over the years. Mm-hmm. But do you ever feel like pressure to be like the wise photographer giving advice?
Oh, no, because it's really about the photographers I'm interviewing. So the shows are not really about me for the most part.
Well, I'm not talking about like just the show. I'm talking about like in general. You're like,
oh no, I let people know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I know enough, right, to do what I need to do, and I know that I can't. I'm a good communicator in terms of being able to help people find their way photographically. I'm a good editor. I can look at work and I can verbalize what I'm seeing and where people can stand to improve or what their strengths are. So I don't necessarily feel like I'm some like wise Buddha, spitting out all these wonderful, thoughts and ideas. It's kind of like it's so much as a reflection of who I see myself as a photographer. Right. I was doing a critique session with 7 or 8 photographers this morning, all of whom were making very amazing work, but very different from anything that I created. And at first I was kind of like, it felt a little daunting to be able to say, well, what can I communicate to them about their works? It's so different from what I was doing. But I was able to, dialogue with them and just give them an honest response in terms of what I was seeing as their strengths and areas where they could improve. And it's just the fact that I've been doing this for, 40 plus years. I have some insights.
Yeah.
But, it's just an opinion, right? Some people are going to agree with what I say. Other people are not. You go to a critique session, portfolio review, you'll get my opinion and you'll get, 4 or 5 other people's opinions, all of whom are very different, maybe even contradictory. So I always qualify what I share with people. It's like, hey, this is just what I think. Don't think of it as definitive or final. Take what you like and then just dump the rest.
Well, are there areas of photography where you still feel like you're a beginner?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to landscapes, I haven't practiced landscapes a lot. So I always find it a little intimidating when I go out and go out to make landscape pictures. But I've gotten better with that. But it doesn't come as easily to me as when I'm doing like just street and travel photography. I mean, I jack in and I'm just like there almost immediately. If I go out and to do landscape photography, it takes me a while to get into a groove.
To feel like you're in the zone. It's just like sports. It's like like you feel like you're in the, whenever they talk about like, oh, he's in the zone. Like you can get there. You can get into this. I refer to it as that. It's like it's almost like a not a trance like state, but it just feels like you're there and you're hitting, and like that's you can play baseball. Like it's just you can see the ball. You can really see the ball, like when you're that sort of being in that state.
Oh yeah, and with sports, that's a subject matter where you need to know the sport in order to be a good sports photographer, whether you're photographing football or baseball, because it's all about anticipation. You know the team, you know the players, you know how they move and how they respond to different plays, and so you can he's likely going to be over here, and so I have to be ready to turn the 300 millimeter lens over there for when he catches the ball or when this guy runs to steal second or third base. That's the people who are really good at that. That's what they're doing.
They're anticipating.
They're not just responding to the moment as it happens, because by that time it's too late. It's moving so fast that you have to be 2 or 3 steps ahead in order to be ready for that moment.
Well, I wasn't specifically talking about sports photography. I was talking about like being in the, like you're talking about like jacking in. I was talking about like being when you're playing a sport and you find yourself like in the zone where you're just like
Oh
can
yeah.
see everything. But you bring up something really interesting there, because I think that anticipation plays itself into a lot more different types of photography than just sports. I mean, like as a wedding photographer, a lot of it is you're reading people's body
Right.
language. You know what's coming next. Oh, this is what's gonna like. They're gonna like. For me, it's a lot of like seeing like, oh, this is the way they're gonna turn. I can tell how they're gonna turn, and like this is what's gonna happen. And I want this frame here. Or like if you're a street photographer, like I am not a great street photographer, but like I know some, like I've talked to great street photographers, and I know some, and just like knowing how much anticipation there comes, like, oh, somebody's going to walk into the frame. I'm waiting for someone to, or like I see that person and they're going to hit the shadow there and whatever. And just like being able to see all those things, this is going to happen, and anticipate that is like that. You said it's just like, when you're, you know, a lot of that is getting into that flow state and being able to see what's coming.
Yeah, because I think other than maybe still life, where you're completely in control in the studio, and maybe other like food photography, for example, anticipation is not necessarily it's not necessary, at least to my thinking. But anything involving people or with landscapes where lighting is going to change and things like that, you have to sort of be prescient about what may likely happen so that you can be prepared for it. And I think the best photographers get that. And that has nothing to do with the equipment. It has more to do with what you've learned about whatever the subject matter is.
Yeah.
And that becomes an essential part of your toolkit. Because if you put me out to go photograph boxing, I might get lucky and get one decent shot, but most of it's going to be trash.
Yeah.
Right? Because my reaction would be far too late. Right? Because if someone knows a boxer and how they box defensively and offensively, and they know exactly, the nuances of that particular boxer, particularly both of them, they know, oh, wait, I know what's coming.
Right.
Right. And they can position themselves and be ready for that. Granted, they're shooting at 10 frames per second, but still, they're still relying on some kind of knowledge about the players and the circumstances involved in order to be ready for that moment when it reveals itself. Because otherwise, people could shoot with these crazy ass cameras that shoot 15, 20 frames per second, but then you're going to have to go through thousands of pictures.
Yeah. There's the spray and pray and hope that you got it. But it's also like, isn't it that much more? I see, like people who do that and they're like, oh, I ended up with 4,000 photos from this shoot or whatever. And it's like, well, great. Now you can like sit and like scroll through all those. Wouldn't it be great to only have like 300 and like that you really framed the way that you wanted, and like really got like that you only had to like get 5 out of like those 300 instead of 4,000.
Yeah.
It depends on like the type of work you're doing, but like, those sorts of things where like I talk to people who do like portrait sessions, and they're like, I did a half an hour portrait session and I took 500 pictures, and I'm like, why? Like, how many are you delivering? And that's something that I think that I've come to terms with in like how I deliver for like things like weddings, because there's a certain emotional quality to photos that like some people are like, I wouldn't deliver that many pictures. And I'm like, yeah, but I know what these people mean to the couple who hired me. So there's like more, I tended to like over deliver a little bit in that sense, because I'm like, there are moments, these are all moments. And you know what? In 10 years, in 20 years, different moments are going to mean different things to them.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like the planning ahead for me. But it's also, I still am getting rid of probably 2/3 of what I shoot at a wedding. Like I'm going through it.
Yeah. And
But
with wedding photographer, there's certain things that are pivotal.
yeah,
Right. The first kiss, the first dance, so on and so forth. But there are all those non-moments, right, that are absolutely critical, that show the relationship of different people who are in attendance at the wedding,
yeah,
before, during, and afterwards. And as a wedding photographer, it's your job to be able to be observant and capture those moments, because they're not aware of the importance of those moments.
yeah.
They're in it. But you as a photographer know, oh, man, this is
This is going to be
I haven't
important to
ready
you.
for this.
Event
Yeah.
like you might not know it right now, but it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be important to you later on. Yeah,
Right.
that sort of thing. Like I think that, I mean, obviously it doesn't translate exactly to other types of like photography, but there are still like those things where you have to understand what the subject or the client, how they're going to feel about this if you're doing it for someone else and it's not strictly a personal project for you. Um, how that's going to, what that's going to mean to them
Mm-hmm.
in the long run. And it might be to like, even if you're like, I've worked for publications before and done like events and photojournalism and things like that. It's like, you need to know your editor and what's the story they're trying to tell.
Right.
Even that sort of thing. It's like, you need to know, like for me, the editor and the author of the story or whatever are my clients. Those are the people who like, I need to like talk to them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is this? What is the story? What story do I need to tell with my photos?
Exactly.
So I'm curious then, like if there was something that you could teach photographers that isn't like a technical thing or like something you can just write in a book. If there's something that is missing from most photography instruction, what would it be?
It's self-editing. Most photographers are terrible editors of their own work. It's one of the hardest things to come to learn how to do. And it's certainly not discussed with all the education that's online in terms of YouTube and blogs and things like that. There's very little attention that's given to editing and culling, right? And I think that at some point, photographers get competent enough where they're able to make good images consistently, and then they're able to do that, and they're able to repeat it. And at some point, they hit a wall. Right, because they make great individual photographs, but then they want to go further and they don't know what the heck to do. And that's when the self-curation has to start happening, where you're putting together bodies of work, whether it's a personal project where you're telling one particular story, or it's an amalgam of different photographs that you've collected over time of a particular subject matter or area. And then being able to put a portfolio or a zine together or something substantive that's tangible, not substantive, tangible from that work. And that part is something that is often missing. I have the opportunity to review a lot of people's work, either a portfolio or certainly because of people who submit work for the podcast. And, the reasons why those people reach me is because they've gotten to that point where they're able to edit and curate their own work. So when I look at it, I get that it's more than just a collection of nice photographs, that they're trying to say something with those. And that's the biggest hurdle for any photographer to get to that point. It's like, yes, I've got all this equipment. I've learned Photoshop or Lightroom. I know how to print. I know how to do all these things. But now what the hell do I want to say? And that's where you have to be able to look at yourself and look at your work and answer that question for yourself, because I can't answer it for you. No one else can answer that for you. It's like, what do you want to say? You've got the privilege of having access to all this equipment and all these resources. But if you want to go to that next level, you have to figure out. And that's where editing and curating your own work happens. But oftentimes people stop there and they get preoccupied with the next bit of kit because they think that that's going to be the breakthrough. Right. And it's like, no, it just means you got more stuff. You got more boxes in your closet. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a breakthrough, but there is this moment of euphoria that comes from buying that new kit, and it gets you to go out and shoot, and you feel like, oh, that's what's missing.
Right.
But that's very short lived.
Yeah.
Right.
It's that thing that like, oh, I've got a new toy and like and I'm going to play with this for a little bit and then I'm going to get tired of it, instead of like sitting. I think that we experience there's some discomfort with sitting with our own thoughts. I think social media has definitely impacted that attention span wise, being able to sit with your own thoughts about something and being able to just look at this and go, what do I think of this? And examine it. And definitely a skill that I had to learn the hard way. But something I try to tell people all the time is like, you look at your portfolio. Like, why are you sharing the same photo? It's not the same subject. It's not the same location. It's not, but it is the same photo as this other photo. Like when you look at it, it is really the same picture, and you need to learn to like you're saying, like go through that and look at it. And that was something that I was doing early on. That it was a breakthrough to sit there and be more critical of my own work and say, no, this is I need variety in here and to show different sides of things, or or tell this story, and by like just the same picture over and over again with just different in different fonts. If you want to say that you're not really telling the story.
And the thing you said about discomfort, I think that's you have to embrace discomfort. Because people get good. I'll speak for myself. I get good at doing particular things a particular way, where I know I can make a good shot of this subject in a particular way. I can pull it out of my butt, not a problem. But it took me a while to get to the point, right? But the problem happens is that when I'm reproducing that same picture over and over again, and I get frustrated at the fact that I'm not doing something differently. Mm. And the only thing that gets me to that new level is to introduce something that makes me a beginner again, a different subject matter. Sometimes it can be a lens choice. It's like, okay, I'm using 35 millimeter. I'm going to use a 24 for the next month or two, right? That's uncomfortable because I'm not as adept at using the 24 as I am with the 35, right? And that period of discomfort is going to result in a lot of bad photographs that fall short until I kind of understand how to leverage that 24 millimeter in a way that I don't when I'm using a 35.
Yeah, I think that there's a certain sense of like limitation is your friend creatively.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and we talked about this earlier with gear, but like when I was getting back into film photography over the last few years, I have all these old, no light meter, like the light meter's burnt out, it's all manual. And, like, so going out there and like trying to figure things out in my head and, and giving myself limitations. Like, I'm only going to take this lens with me for like this week, whatever, or I'm only going to take, X, film stock, to give me that limitation. And it broke me out of a period of like where I wasn't feeling creative. Like I didn't have the juice. I refer to it as the juice. Like you got to have the juice. Like there were no creative juices flowing, and it just felt like it wasn't there. And then it wasn't having an abundance of stuff or things to shoot that brought me out of it. I only got out of it by like restricting myself, and being critical on that thought process and being like, no, just do this. You can only do this. And then the rest of it is in your head.
When I travel now, I just take my X100 with me. That's it. I've made the mistake of taking more kit with me, and all it ends up being is just heavy weight that I got to carry around all over the place.
Well, okay. What lenses do you take with you?
The X100 has a fixed 23 millimeter.
Okay.
So that's the equivalent of a 35 millimeter. So that just becomes it. That's just all I take. I mean, I've taken other kit with me, but I end up, it's not worth the trouble of carrying all that stuff around, switching lenses, you know, walking all day, and putting in 20,000 steps and have this bag with 4 lenses. Just, I'm too old.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not 20 years old. I don't want to be lugging this big camera bag around with me. So I just have this little pocketable camera with me, and it gives me all that I need. Yeah, I may not have the 7200 to be able to shoot a particular kind of shot, but that's okay. There are a lot of shots that I miss, but I for a lot of previous kits, I always bought the equivalent of a 70, 80 to 150 or something like that. And I didn't make that many pictures of that. I always got it because I felt like just in case, right? But nowhere did I justify having any iteration of that focal length in any of the kits that I've had. And now I just don't even bother to have something like that, around. Especially, I have one, but, practically speaking, when I'm traveling,
right,
I do not use it. If I have a job or an assignment, yes, I have that with me.
Need it. Yeah, makes sense. But yeah, I probably shoot almost everything with a 35 or 50 when I'm traveling. Like that's like probably 90% of what I'm photographing.
Mm-hmm.
But it took me, again, same thing. It took me a long time to realize that, like, I don't need all this extra stuff. I just need the very basic, and I'll be a lot happier with my life. And same thing. I'm old. I don't need to carry a 150 to 600 with me, just in case I spot a bird that I might want to take a picture of.
Yeah, a masseuse is not in my budget, so.
I'm curious, like, do you think that we've talked a lot about, like, your work versus, like, what you're doing personally? Do you think that there's some photographic work that's just meant for you as the photographer?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of personal work that I'm making that'll probably never see sort of the light of day. It's just very personal. My mother-in-law lived with us for the last 3 years of her life, and I sort of documented that whole experience. My mom is living with dementia right now, and I make some pictures of that, about our journey with that. And those are pictures are just for family. I mean, I share some of the pictures of my mother-in-law in some of my workshops, particularly when it's a workshop where people are using their own lives to create bodies of work. So I will share that there. But other than that, I don't share that work. I started it with the intent of it being a family-only thing primarily. But I use it as an illustration of what's possible with that kind of work to my students.
Yeah, I think I think that's something that I think we touched on earlier. Like, there are things that you don't have to monetize or put out in the world. And I mean, I always think of Vivian Mayer, kind of the thoughts like she didn't develop this stuff. Like, all these photos that we see and we're, in books and things now, that she had no intention or didn't have the means at times to, like, develop all this stuff, but like it or didn't intend for it to be out in the wild.
Yeah, and she's a really good example about the importance of curation, because I've seen some of the books that I don't think were well edited. There's some of them I thought that it was pretty good, but others that weren't, and it's largely due to the fact that the people who are in possession of those photographs are not the photographer or aren't photographers, period. Right. So it's
I went to the Photographiska exhibit that they had. I think it was last year. I'm pretty sure it was last year. Whoever curated that was very good, because like the work was really incredible, and I was kind of blown away. Like, I've always been sort of admired her composition, a
Mhm.
lot. Like especially with like use of mirrors and putting herself into photos. And there was a shot that she took of a storefront where she managed to like get her camera in one mirror and her face in another one, and it was like the like, but also like compositionally, the rest of the shot is like gorgeous. And I was just like, this is really incredible, and I had never seen it in any books or anywhere else. So I mean, whoever like pulled this one out, I was like, this is a really that's the sort of like thing where I'm like out taking pictures for myself where I'm like, man, I wish I could. That's one of those ways. I wish I could see things sometimes like that. Like I could see that. That's not a, like I want to recreate Vivian Mayer's photo, but it's like to be able to see with that sort of eye for composition. Like I feel like I have my eye for things, but there are times where I'm like, oh, man, I like if I could, if that's something I could work on, like to be able to just see all of those disparate things all happening in one frame.
Yeah, yeah. I wish he had,
Uh,
been around enough to be able to kind of discuss her practice. But from
yeah,
just what I understand of her, it's just like, she was working as a nanny, so most of her working hours were spent doing that. But when she wasn't working, she was out making photographs, or maybe while she was going commuting from her home to the family's home where she was taking care of them. So she was, yeah, she was out of Chicago, wasn't
yeah.
it?
Chicago, New York, both.
Okay. Yeah, but the advantage that she had is, she was largely in walking cities.
Yeah,
She wasn't in LA.
yeah,
She would have been a very different photographer had that been the case. But I think that, she's a really good example of someone who wasn't quote unquote a professional photographer, but her daily dedication to the craft, you know, and she didn't have the benefit of social media in terms of learning, but she had definitely had a lot of influences
yeah.
because that does not come intuitively. Yes, she had talent, right?
Oh, but
But
she
she
was
built on that.
influenced. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm curious. Like, is I don't know. I'm curious. Has photography ever healed something in you? Because we're kind of like I think of like a lot of people when you talk about more personal work, and it's sort of like you're bringing up the like your mother-in-law and your mother, and thinking about those sorts of things. And if you don't want to talk about this, totally fine. I will edit it out. Um, but has there been it doesn't have to be directly related to whatever you were photographing, but has there ever been a something that you worked on that really filled a hole, or
Yeah, I
or
can't say any particular work, but I think just the the practice of photography has been a very positive thing for me. It's been very self-affirming because from the very first pictures that I made as a kid, I discovered that the way that I see the world and the way that manifests in the photograph could have an impact on another human being. And for a kid who at the time had a really bad stutter, was very insecure, who felt very disconnected, the fact that I could create something that could elicit an emotional response from somebody else was incredibly affirming, and that my point of view mattered. So I think that's kind of been the through line for all the things that I do photographically, not only my own photographs, but with the podcast and everything, is that my point of view matters. So I am awash with as many insecurities as everyone else out there, but that has always been like my fallback, right? That regardless of the circumstances in my life, this is something that I know that reveals something special about me. It's not about me being good at it, right? It's just that when I do this, I know that I'm doing something that really expresses something about me in a really positive light that's usually free of any sort of negativity or judgment. It's the one thing that if someone looked at my photographs and said they suck, I would not even flinch. I go, okay, you know, just because I know what I'm capable, I know what the work is for me. Right. And so when someone would say something like that, I would just like, it wouldn't matter to me just because it's, it's such a true, it's a reflection of my inner truth. I know that sounds kind of touchy feely and, you know, wheat grassy, but
West
there's part of
Coast.
me that I know is absolutely untarnished and true about me, and it comes through in my photographs. So that's been one thing that sort of helped me sort of navigate times where I'm, burdened by the insecurities about other aspects about my life, where I'm not as confident, right? But I know about this one thing, I, I'm I'm good. I'm not saying I'm good as a photographer, but I'm good personally.
You're good with yourself.
Yeah.
So after all of these hundreds of conversations that you've had with other photographers and decades in the business, what conversations do you think we're missing right now, like in the photography community? What should all of us be talking about? What kind of conversations should younger photographers be having with themselves, each other? Those, like, is there anything that stands out to you?
And it's, the big question, and largely not getting addressed even on my own show, which hopefully I can have conversations like that going in the future, is like, but is largely where are we going in terms of an industry? It's really, really hard. I mean, I came up in the waning age of the magazines, right? Editorial photography, and all the magazines I ever wrote for are gone. And people don't have a relationship with magazines as they did in the past, right? And that used to be an outlet for photographers to be able to, get work discovered and get opportunities that would blossom into, commercial and editorial work, and maybe even fine artwork. And it's like, if people want to make a life as a photographer today, what do they do? And much of it is, especially in that genre, has revolved about, being video producers, content makers. I hate that word. But you have to be adept at creating video and still. That just, it becomes an essential requirement for you to be able to make a living as a photographer and be diversifying your skill set. But man, video is it involves so much time and resources, far more than just being a still photographer. But for people who are sort of dedicated to just doing still work, man, it's a challenge, and it's hard. Especially right now, I was just talking to a photographer who has historically made her living doing photography for motion pictures and television. And since the COVID and since the strike, man, it's been hard for those people to get gigs. And it's like, what do you do?
Right.
Right.
And now with like production, I'm sorry, prompt jockeys, AI, and all the other stuff going on, like that will be. This is a big. I was an actor, so this is a big thing in the acting community. Is like, you have to. They were trying to like take people's images and be able to like full body scan them and create new characters from them or use their voice, which is something I used to do a lot of voiceovers. And people were like, "Oh, they're like in the new contracts they were trying to do during the strike. They were like, the studios wanted to be able to, like, if you did your voice for like a show, that they could take that recording, feed it into AI, and create a whole other thing and not pay you."
Right.
And it's like, so they're paying me for one episode, and my character or whatever could be in hundreds of more episodes of this show in perpetuity, and all you're doing is like prompting it for forever. And it's like that sort of that sort of feeling of like, and AI in general for like, I mean, the slop is, uh, real, for
Yeah.
in the visual world, and it's, I don't know. I'm hoping there's going to be a backlash against that. That doesn't talk about what you're finding ways through. I think there's also like when you talk about print, there's so much out there that is like pay to play, like that tricks these to younger or less experienced photographers. Like, oh, we'll print you in our magazine. You just got to pay us $500. And you get and you'd be surprised that like it happens in Vogue and like there's a big thing in like Vogue Europe. I think they were having like whole editorials. They were paying like $6,000 or $7,000 to like have a whole like shoot published. And yeah, it just like, because thinking of it as those people were thinking of it as advertising, but also it gives you a whole different level of clout and saying, well, I was published in Vogue, as opposed to saying I was published in Joe Schmo's, magazine where he just takes, $500 from people and prints their photos. Which is like a big thing in like the modeling industry now. Like they photograph, like they have guys like photographing these models, and they're like, oh, you pay us X amount of money that they're paying the model or whatever, and they're just printing these magazines, like one-off magazines.
Yeah, and on the rights grabs,
Yeah.
That all these clients are, trying to claim ownership of the copyright, and which, secondary usage of the images were at one point a way that photographers made a living,
Licensing.
through stock or
Yeah.
you're licensing the images to other publications or books like that. And now with these clients saying, no, we own the copyright, you get paid the one-time fee, and you lose your copyright, and we can use it anywhere we want ad infinitum. And it's just like,
yeah, like I don't know. It's one of those conversations I have with younger photographers about like, you have to think about if you want to do this as a business, if you want to do this as something you just enjoy, or like what is you have to have, I'm not saying you have to have the end goal figured out, but you kind of have to figure out like what you really want to get out of it in the short term. What's your 5-year plan or whatever you want to call it? But in that way, you need to figure out how to direct your energy.
Yeah.
It's because it's not easy out there.
There are easier ways to make money.
Tired of juggling multiple programs to get the perfect look? Say hello to On1 Photo Raw, the ultimate photo editing software built by photographers for photographers. It's fast, powerful, and packed with tools. From precision masking to AI-powered enhancement, On1 Photo Raw gives you complete creative control without the subscription headaches. Edit raw files with ease, retouch like a pro, and bring your vision to life with stunning effects, all in one intuitive platform. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned pro, On1 Photo Raw helps your photos stand out and your workflow stay smooth. Ready to upgrade your editing game? Download a free trial. Just go to nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/on1. That's nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/on1 and start creating without limits. Use our link and the discount code NERDYPHOTO20. That's NERDYPHOTO20 and save 20% off if you decide to purchase or subscribe to On1 software. On1 Photo Raw, powerful, creative, yours. Hey photographers, imagine losing every photo, project, or document in a single crash. Scary, right? That's why there's Backblaze, the simple, reliable, and automatic way to back up your important data and photos to the cloud. Photographers, creatives, and everyday users, Backblaze protects what matters most with unlimited backup and easy recovery whenever you need it. I use Backblaze as part of my workflow to back up my most recent shoots until they're delivered to my clients, my most important business photos and documents as well, and all of my personal photos and videos. It's just $9 a month or $99 a year for unlimited data backup from one computer with 1 year version history and access to your data from anywhere. Crashes happen. With Backblaze, your files are safe, secure, and just a click away. Start your backup today at nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/Backblaze or click the link in the episode notes, because peace of mind is priceless. That's nerdyphotographer.com/Backblaze, because you never know when a crash is going to happen.
Hey. And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
How much money do you think that during the height of his cartel's power, Pablo Escobar was spending on rubber bands? Per week.
Per week. I'll say like 40 grand.
No, it's $2,500 per week. Just on rubber.
Per week.
Per
Okay.
week.
20. Oh my God.
On rubber bands to hold the money. It's also estimated that they lost over $2 billion to rats. Just eating the money.
Oh my God.
It's crazy. It is insanity. It's absolute insanity. I don't know how you feel about that, but it
Well,
kind of leaves me stunned.
I'm just grateful I don't have that kind of rat problem.
Yeah, me either. Very next. Thank you so much for being on the show. It was an honor. Where can people find you and your show?
They can follow me at thecandidframe.com. There I have links for, that's my photographic website, my links to Instagram workshops that I'm having. I also have a Substack. Just Google Substack, Evadian and you'll find me. And yeah. So hopefully people not familiar with the show, they'll check it out.
I've definitely worth listening to.
2006, so got a lot of conversations, including a conversation with Martin Parr, who we lost last week.
I just listened to that recently. I actually met Martin a few times.
Did you?
We worked concurrently for a publication for a little while, and just remembering conversations that I had with him. Yeah, it's a great episode, by the way. People should go check it out. I'll include those links in the episode notes. Again, thank you so much for spending some time with me.
My pleasure.
And we are back. My deepest thanks to Birion X Perillo for being on the show. You can find his links in the episode notes. Be sure to follow along with him and tell us what you think about this show. What do you think of it? Was it informative, helpful, just fun to listen to? Leave us a review and let us know. You can also follow along with us on the socials at The Nerdy Photo. That's at The Nerdy Photo, no dots, underscores, or dashes, on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, TikTok, and Reddit. And we are finally at the top of the mountain, and there's nobody here.
Snug?
I see there's a note. It says, on my lunch break, back in an hour. Okay, then. I guess we wait. Until next time, everybody, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.